was supposed to be her happiest day, her 23rd birthday. The candles were lit, the cake was decorated, and her family gathered around her with love in their eyes. But by the next morning, the candles had burned out, and so had her light. What should have been a celebration of life became the night that took everything from her. This is the story of a young woman who trusted the wrong person, and that person was family. If you've ever trusted someone who ended up breaking you, take a deep breath. This story isn't just about tragedy, it's about the danger of silence and why we must never ignore the signs, because sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed. Sometimes it's sitting right across the dinner table. This is a story that will stay with you long after you finish watching. It's a story about trust, betrayal, family secrets, and the courage it takes to speak the truth when everyone around you wants silence. So settle in, because what you're about to hear needs to be heard. And if you know someone who needs to hear this too, share it with them, because awareness saves lives. Her name was Emma Claire Thompson, 23 years old with dreams bigger than the small town she grew up in. But to understand what happened on that birthday night, you need to understand who Emma was, where she came from, and why family meant everything to her. Emma was born in a town called Riverside, population barely 5,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where Friday night football games are the biggest event of the week, and where family roots run deep, sometimes too deep. Her mother, Patricia, raised Emma mostly on her own. Emma's father left when she was just 4 years old, packed his bags one Tuesday morning and never looked back. Patricia never talked about him much, and Emma learned early not to ask. So it was just the two of them for a long time, living in a small house on Maple Street, making the best of what they had. Patricia worked as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling double shifts to keep food on the table and clothes on Emma's back. Money was always tight, holidays were modest, but Patricia made sure Emma never felt like she was missing out. She'd save up all year just to make Christmas special, just to see that smile on her daughter's face. And Emma, she adored her mother. She saw how hard Patricia worked, how much she sacrificed, and it made Emma want to be better, do better, make her mother proud. But here's the thing about growing up without a father, at least for Emma. She craved that male presence in her life, someone stable, someone who could teach her things her mother couldn't, someone who made her feel protected. And that's where her uncle came in, David Mitchell, Patricia's older brother, 12 years older than her to be exact. David had always been the golden child in their family, the one who did everything right, got good grades, stayed out of trouble, built a respectable life. He worked as a manager at the local manufacturing plant, had been there for 20 years, and everyone in town knew him. People would stop him at the grocery store just to chat, to ask his opinion on town matters, to tell him what a good man he was. And for most of Emma's life, she believed that too. David started showing up more after Emma's father left. At first, it was just helping Patricia with things around the house, fixing the leaky faucet, mowing the lawn, changing the oil in her car. But then he started coming to Emma's school events, her dance recitals when she was 7, her middle school science fair, her high school graduation. He was there, camera in hand, smiling proudly like any father would. Patricia was grateful. She'd tell her friends how lucky she was to have a brother like David, someone who stepped up when her daughter needed a father figure. And Emma, she loved him. She called him Uncle Dave, but in her heart, he was more than that. He was the dad she never had. When Emma turned 10, David started a tradition. Every birthday, he'd take her out for ice cream, just the two of them, and they'd talk about her dreams, her goals, what she wanted to be when she grew up. At 10, she wanted to be a veterinarian. At 13, a teacher. At 16, a business owner. And David listened to every word, encouraged every dream, told her she could do anything she set her mind to. Looking back now, knowing what we know, those moments feel different. Were they genuine? Or was he building trust, creating a bond that he'd later exploit? It's a question that haunts Emma to this day. But back then, it felt real. It felt like love. It felt like family. Emma's teenage years were typical, at least on the surface. She had friends, got decent grades, worked part-time at the local diner to help her mom with bills. She wasn't the most popular girl in school, but she wasn't invisible either. She was kind, the type of person who'd sit with the lonely kid at lunch, who'd help classmates with homework, who genuinely cared about people. Her best friend growing up was a girl named Jessica, and they were inseparable from 5th grade all the way through high school. They'd spend hours talking about boys, about their future, about getting out of Riverside one day and seeing the world. Jessica's family was different from Emma's. 2 parents, a nice house, family vacations every summer. But Jessica never made Emma feel less than. She'd invite Emma on trips, her parents would pay for everything, and Emma's pride would sting a little, but her mother would tell her to accept the kindness, to enjoy the experience. And she did. David was always around during those years too. He'd show up at the diner where Emma worked, sit at the counter, order coffee, and chat with her during her shift. He'd ask about school, about Jessica, about the boys she was interested in, and Emma would tell him everything, because that's what you do with family you trust. You share your life with them. When Emma graduated high school, she had a choice to make. She'd been accepted to a state university 3 hours away, but the cost was overwhelming. Even with financial aid, even with loans, it felt impossible. Patricia wanted her to go, told her they'd figure it out. But Emma saw the worry in her mother's eyes, saw the bills piling up on the kitchen table. So she made a decision. She'd stay in Riverside for a couple of years, work full-time, save money, and then go to school. It wasn't the path she'd dreamed of, but it was the responsible one. David supported her decision. He even helped her get a second job at the plant where he worked, in the administrative office, filing paperwork, answering phones. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than the diner, and Emma was grateful. She worked hard, saved every penny she could, and slowly, her dream of starting her own business began to take shape. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. As Emma's 23rd birthday approached, Patricia started planning. She wanted to do something special, something that reminded Emma how loved she was. Patricia knew her daughter had been feeling a little lost lately, a little stuck, and she hoped a celebration surrounded by family would lift her spirits. So she started making calls, inviting cousins, aunts, uncles, close family friends. And of course, David was the first to RSVP. He even offered to bring the cake, insisted on it, said he wanted to contribute to making Emma's day perfect. Patricia thought it was sweet. Emma thought it was typical Uncle Dave, always wanting to help, always showing up. The week leading up to Emma's birthday was busy. She worked extra hours at both jobs, trying to add a little more to her savings. Patricia was at the house preparing, cleaning, decorating. David stopped by a few times that week, dropping off supplies, helping set up tables in the backyard. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But if you ask Emma now, she'll tell you there were signs. Small things, easy to dismiss in the moment, but in hindsight, they meant something. The way David's hugs lasted a little too long. The way he'd compliment her appearance, tell her she was growing into such a beautiful woman. The way he'd text her late at night, just checking in, asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. At the time, Emma thought it was care. She thought it was love. She thought it was what uncles did. But it wasn't. It was grooming. It was manipulation. It was a predator carefully laying the groundwork for what he planned to do. On the morning of her birthday, Emma woke up feeling hopeful. 23 felt significant somehow, like the start of something new. She went to work at the diner for the early shift, and her co-workers surprised her with a cupcake and sang happy birthday. It was a small gesture, but it made her smile. After her shift, she went home to get ready for the party. Patricia had decorated the living room with streamers and balloons, and the smell of lemon cake, Emma's favorite, filled the house. Emma put on a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, and pulled her hair into a ponytail. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought, "This is going to be a good day." She had no idea how wrong she was. She had no idea that by tomorrow everything would be different. She had no idea that the person she trusted most would be the one to destroy her. Guests started arriving around 6 in the evening. Emma's Aunt Linda came first, bringing her 2 kids, Emma's younger cousins, who immediately ran around the house with too much energy. Then came Uncle George and Aunt Diane, followed by a few family friends, the Johnsons from down the street, the Parkers who'd known Patricia for years. Jessica couldn't make it. She was out of state and had sent a gift in the mail, a journal with an inscription that read, "For all the dreams you're going to make real." Emma had cried a little when she read it. David arrived right on time, 7 o'clock, carrying a beautiful cake decorated with fresh flowers and the words, "Happy Birthday, Emma," written in elegant script. He set it on the kitchen counter and hugged Emma tightly, told her she looked beautiful, told her he was so proud of her. Emma hugged him back, thanked him for the cake, for always being there. Patricia watched from across the room, smiling, grateful that her brother had been such a constant in her daughter's life. If only she'd known. If only any of them had known. The party was everything Patricia hoped it would be. There was music playing, classic hits from the 80s and 90s that everyone knew the words to. People were laughing, sharing stories, passing around plates of food. Emma's Aunt Linda told embarrassing childhood stories, and Emma groaned but laughed along. Uncle George made a toast, raised his glass, and said, "To Emma, the hardest working young woman I know. May this year bring you everything you've been working for." Everyone clinked their glasses, and Emma felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging. This was her family. These were her people. She was safe here. Or so she thought. David stayed close to Emma throughout the evening. He'd refill her drink before she even asked, made sure she had enough food on her plate, stood beside her during photos. At one point, he put his arm around her shoulder for a picture, and Emma leaned into him, smiling for the camera. That photo would later be used in court, evidence of how comfortable she felt with him, how much she trusted him, how normal everything seemed. Because that's how predators operate. They don't look dangerous. They look safe. As the night went on, people started to leave. Emma's younger cousins were getting tired. Aunt Linda packed them up and headed home. Uncle George and Aunt Diane left around 9:30, hugging Emma on their way out, telling her to enjoy being 23. The Johnsons and the Parkers left shortly after. By 10 o'clock, it was just Emma, Patricia, and David. Patricia was exhausted. She'd been on her feet all day, cooking, hosting, making sure everyone had a good time. She looked at Emma and said, "Baby, I'm going to head to bed. I can barely keep my eyes open." Emma smiled and said, "Go, Mom. You did amazing today. Thank you for everything." Patricia kissed her daughter on the forehead, hugged David, and told him not to stay too late. "I won't," he said. "I'll just help Emma clean up a bit and then head home." Patricia smiled, grateful as always, and went upstairs. The house grew quiet. It was just Emma and David now, alone, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that was supposed to be joyful. They started cleaning up in silence at first, stacking plates, wrapping up leftover food, throwing away paper napkins. Emma was tired, but in a good way, the kind of tired that comes after a happy day. She started talking about her plans, about the cafe she wanted to open, about how close she was to having enough saved up. David listened, nodded, but he seemed distracted. "You've really grown up, Emma," he said suddenly, his tone different, heavier. Emma laughed it off. "I mean, I am 23 now." David stepped closer. "No, I mean, you've become a beautiful woman, inside and out." Emma felt something shift in the air. It was subtle, but it was there, a discomfort she couldn't quite name. "Thanks, Uncle Dave," she said, trying to keep things light, trying to brush off the weirdness she was starting to feel. But David didn't step back. He stayed close, too close. "You know I've always cared about you, right?" he said. "More than anyone." Emma's stomach tightened. "Yeah, of course, your family." "It's more than that," he said, and his hand reached out, touched her arm. Emma froze. Every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong, but her mind couldn't catch up. This was Uncle Dave, the man who'd been there her whole life, the man she trusted. This couldn't be what it felt like. This couldn't be happening. "Uncle Dave, I think I'm just going to finish up tomorrow," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm really tired." But he didn't move. "Emma, I just want you to know, I've always felt a connection with you, something special." Emma's heart was pounding now. She took a step back. "I think you should go." For a moment, David just stared at her. And then, something in his expression changed. The warmth she'd always seen, the kindness, it was gone. What replaced it was something cold, something entitled. "Don't be like that," he said. "After everything I've done for you." Emma's hands were trembling. "Please just leave." But he didn't, and what happened next would change Emma's life forever. Emma's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. This was her uncle, the man who took her for ice cream on her birthdays, the man who helped her mom fix things around the house, the man she called when she needed advice. How could this be real? How could this be happening? David stepped even closer, and Emma backed up until she hit the kitchen counter. There was nowhere else to go. "You're overreacting," he said, his voice calm, almost patronizing. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Emma. I'm just being honest about how I feel." Emma's throat felt tight. "Uncle Dave, this isn't okay. You need to leave. Now." But instead of leaving, he reached out and touched her face. Emma flinched, turned her head away, and said, "Stop, please stop." For a brief moment, she thought maybe he'd listen. Maybe he'd realize what he was doing and leave. Maybe this nightmare would end. But it didn't. David's expression hardened. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. I've been there for you your entire life. I've supported you, encouraged you, helped your mother raise you, and you can't even show me a little gratitude?" Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. Gratitude? Is that what he thought this was about? "I am grateful," she said, her voice breaking. "But this isn't right. You're my uncle." David laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It was bitter, angry. "I'm not really your uncle, Emma. Not by blood. I'm just your mother's brother. There's nothing wrong with what I'm feeling." Emma's mind was spinning. She didn't know what to do. She thought about screaming, but her mother was upstairs asleep, and what would that do? She thought about running, but where would she go? She thought about fighting, but he was stronger than her. So she did what so many survivors do in moments like this. She froze. Her body shut down, her mind disconnected, and she just stood there, hoping it would be over soon, hoping she'd wake up and realize this was just a terrible dream. David took her silence as compliance, and in the moments that followed, a line was crossed that could never be uncrossed. Somewhere between the laughter and the last slice of cake, a line was crossed, a line that should never, ever be crossed. When it was over, David straightened his shirt, looked at Emma like nothing had happened, and said, "I'll see you next week for dinner." And then he left. Just like that. Walked out the door, got in his car, and drove home. Emma stood there in the kitchen, shaking, tears streaming down her face, unable to move. She didn't know how long she stood there. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't make sense anymore. Eventually, she walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest and tried to make sense of what had just happened. But there was no making sense of it. There was only pain. There was only shame. There was only the crushing realization that the person she trusted most in the world had just destroyed her. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat on the bathroom floor until the sun came up, replaying everything in her mind, trying to figure out if there was something she could have done differently. Maybe if she'd screamed. Maybe if she'd fought harder. Maybe if she hadn't been so trusting. Maybe. Survivors of assault often blame themselves. They ask what they could have done differently, as if they had any control over someone else's evil. But the truth is, Emma did nothing wrong. She trusted someone she was supposed to be able to trust. She believed in family. She believed in safety. And those beliefs were weaponized against her. When Patricia came downstairs the next morning, humming to herself, still happy from the party, she found Emma sitting on the bathroom floor. And the moment their eyes met, Patricia knew. She knew something terrible had happened. Patricia dropped to her knees beside her daughter, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Emma, baby, what happened? What's wrong?" Emma couldn't speak at first. The words were stuck in her throat, trapped behind tears and shame and fear. But eventually, slowly, painfully, she told her mother everything. She told her about the comments David made, about the way he touched her, about how she'd asked him to stop and he didn't. She told her about how she froze, how she didn't fight, how she felt like it was her fault. And with every word, Patricia felt her world crumbling. Because the man Emma was describing, the man who had violated her daughter, was Patricia's brother. The person she'd trusted more than anyone. The person she'd welcomed into their home, into their lives, without a second thought. Patricia's first instinct was disbelief. Not because she didn't believe Emma, but because her mind couldn't reconcile the man she knew with the monster her daughter was describing. David, her big brother, the man who helped raise Emma. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. But she looked at her daughter's face, saw the pain, the trauma, the truth. And she knew. She knew it was real. Patricia held Emma while she cried, told her over and over that it wasn't her fault, that she believed her, that they'd get through this together. But inside, Patricia was breaking. She was angry. She was devastated. She was filled with guilt. How did she not see this? How did she not know? Were there signs she missed? Did she fail her daughter? These questions would haunt Patricia for years to come. But in that moment, she pushed them aside. Her daughter needed her, and she wasn't going to let her down again. Patricia made a decision. She was going to call the police. Emma panicked. "No, Mom, please, I can't. I don't want everyone to know. I don't want to go through that." Patricia understood. She knew how hard it would be, how public, how painful. But she also knew that if they didn't report it, David would get away with it. And if he got away with it, he might do it again. To someone else's daughter, someone else's niece. Patricia held Emma's face in her hands and said, "Baby, I know you're scared. I know this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. But we have to. Not just for you, but for every other girl he might hurt." Emma sobbed. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Patricia said, "and I'll be right there with you, every step of the way." So Patricia made the call. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial the numbers, but she did it. When the operator answered, Patricia said, "I need to report a sexual assault." And just like that, everything changed. Within an hour, 2 detectives arrived at the house. A woman named Detective Sarah Morrison and a man named Detective Frank Hayes. They were kind, patient, and professional. They sat with Emma in the living room, assured her that she was safe, and gently asked her to tell them what happened. Emma told them everything. It was excruciating, reliving it all, putting words to the nightmare. But she did it. Detective Morrison took notes, asked clarifying questions, and told Emma how brave she was. Detective Hayes asked if Emma had showered or changed clothes. She had. She didn't know she wasn't supposed to. "It's okay," he said. "We'll work with what we have." They asked for David's full name, his address, his phone number. They asked about his relationship with Emma, how long he'd been in her life, if there had been any prior incidents. Emma told them everything she could remember. Before the detectives left, they explained what would happen next. They'd open an investigation, interview David, collect evidence, and depending on what they found, they might arrest him. They told Emma that the process would be long, that it wouldn't be easy, but that they'd do everything in their power to hold him accountable. Emma nodded, numb, exhausted. After the detectives left, Patricia called her sister Linda and told her what happened. Linda was in shock. "David, are you sure? Emma must be mistaken. David would never—" "Don't," Patricia said, her voice sharp. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. My daughter was assaulted, and I believe her." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then Linda said, "I'm sorry. I can't believe it." "Believe it," Patricia said. And then she hung up. That conversation set the tone for what was to come. The family was about to be torn apart. Word spread quickly. In a small town like Riverside, secrets don't stay secret for long. Within days, everyone knew. The girl who worked at the diner accused her uncle of assault. People whispered in grocery store aisles, at the post office, at church. Some people believed Emma, others didn't. And the ones who didn't were loud about it. Emma couldn't leave the house without feeling eyes on her. She'd walk into the diner for her shift, and conversations would stop. People would stare, whisper, judge. One regular customer, an older man named Mr. Peters, looked at Emma and said, "Shame on you for trying to ruin that man's life." Emma quit the diner that day. She couldn't take it anymore. Her job at the plant was worse. David still worked there, and though HR had been notified and an internal investigation was underway, he was still showing up every day, acting like nothing happened. Emma couldn't do it. She couldn't walk those halls knowing he was there, knowing people were taking his side. So she quit that job too. Now she had no income, no savings plan, no way to move forward. Her dream of opening a cafe felt like a cruel joke. Patricia wasn't faring much better. Her family, the people she'd loved and trusted her whole life, were divided. Some stood by her and Emma. Her sister Linda eventually came around, apologized for her initial reaction, and became one of Emma's fiercest supporters. But others, like Uncle George, refused to believe it. "David's a good man," George said. "He's been a pillar of this community for decades. I think Emma's confused, maybe misunderstood something." Patricia stopped speaking to George after that. Diane, George's wife, tried to play peacemaker, but Patricia wasn't interested. "You're either with my daughter or you're against her," Patricia said. "There's no middle ground here." The family that used to gather for holidays, for birthdays, for Sunday dinners, was fractured, and the cracks would never fully heal. Meanwhile, the investigation was moving forward. Detective Morrison and Detective Hayes were thorough. They interviewed Emma multiple times, each session more draining than the last. They interviewed Patricia, asked about David's behavior over the years, if she'd ever noticed anything inappropriate. Patricia racked her brain, replayed decades of memories, and realized there were moments, small things she'd dismissed at the time. The way David always insisted on being the one to tuck Emma in when she was little. The way he'd comment on Emma's appearance, call her his special girl. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now it felt like evidence. The detectives also interviewed people at the plant, co-workers who'd worked with David for years. Most of them defended him. "David's a great guy," one co-worker said. "Always professional, always kind. I don't believe he'd do something like this." But one woman, a younger employee named Rachel, had a different story. She came forward and said that David had made her uncomfortable on multiple occasions. He'd stand too close, make comments about her appearance, once even touched her lower back in a way that made her skin crawl. She'd never reported it because she needed the job, and David was her boss's friend. But now, hearing about Emma, she felt she had to speak up. Rachel's testimony was crucial. It established a pattern of behavior. It showed that Emma wasn't an isolated incident, that David had a history of crossing boundaries. 3 months after Emma made her report, the detectives had enough evidence. They showed up at David's house early one morning with a warrant for his arrest. David answered the door in his pajamas, coffee in hand, looking annoyed. "What's this about?" he asked. Detective Hayes read him his rights. "David Mitchell, you're under arrest for sexual assault." David's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong." "You'll have a chance to tell your side," Detective Morrison said. "But right now, you're coming with us." David was taken to the station, booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. His mugshot would later be published in the local newspaper, and the town would erupt in debate. Some people saw it as justice. Others saw it as a witch hunt. David posted bail within 24 hours. He hired a lawyer, a man named Gregory Fuller, known for his aggressive defense tactics, and the battle lines were drawn. On one side, Emma, Patricia, and the few family members and friends who believed them. On the other side, David, his lawyer, and a community that didn't want to believe one of their own could do something so terrible. Emma knew the fight ahead would be brutal, but she also knew she couldn't back down. Not now. Not after coming this far. The months leading up to the trial were some of the darkest of Emma's life. She started therapy, something her mother insisted on, and at first, Emma resisted. "Talking about it isn't going to change what happened," she said. But her therapist, a woman named Dr. Ellen Zhao, was patient. She didn't push, she just listened. And slowly, session by session, Emma started to open up. She talked about the assault, yes, but she also talked about the guilt, the shame, the feeling that her body had betrayed her by freezing instead of fighting. Dr. Zhao helped her understand that freezing is a survival response, that her brain was trying to protect her, that she did nothing wrong. It took a long time for Emma to believe that. Some days, she still doesn't. But therapy gave her tools, ways to cope when the flashbacks came, when the nightmares woke her up in the middle of the night, when the weight of it all felt too heavy to carry. Patricia was in therapy too. She was dealing with her own trauma, her own guilt. She kept asking herself how she didn't see it, how she let a predator into her daughter's life. Dr. Zhao reminded her that predators are experts at hiding, that they manipulate, deceive, and exploit trust, that Patricia was a victim too in a way. But that didn't make the guilt go away. Meanwhile, David was free on bail, living his life like nothing happened. He went to work, went to the grocery store, even showed up at church on Sundays. People who believed him would stop him, shake his hand, tell him they were praying for him. People who believed Emma would cross the street to avoid him. The town was divided, and the tension was unbearable. David's lawyer, Gregory Fuller, was building a defense. His strategy was clear: discredit Emma. Paint her as someone seeking attention, someone with a grudge, someone who misunderstood an innocent interaction. Fuller dug into Emma's past, looking for anything he could use. He found out about her relationship with Tyler, the mechanic, and tried to paint her as promiscuous. He found out she'd once seen a counselor in high school for anxiety, and tried to suggest she was mentally unstable. It was a classic defense tactic: attack the victim, make the jury doubt her credibility. But the prosecution, led by a determined district attorney named Michelle Torres, wasn't going to let that happen. Torres had been a prosecutor for 15 years, and she'd seen cases like this before. She knew how defense attorneys operated, and she was ready. Torres built her case carefully. She had Emma's testimony, Patricia's testimony, Rachel's testimony from the plant. She had text messages David sent Emma in the weeks leading up to the assault, messages that seemed innocent on the surface but took on a different meaning in context. She had the timeline, the opportunity, the motive. The trial date was set, April 15th, 6 months after the assault. 6 months of waiting, of worrying, of wondering if justice would be served. Emma was terrified. She'd have to sit in that courtroom, face David, and tell her story in front of strangers. She'd have to be cross-examined by Fuller, who would try to tear her apart. She'd have to relive the worst night of her life over and over again. But she was ready, because she wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. She was doing it for Rachel, for every other woman David might have hurt, for every other girl who might stay silent because she saw how hard it was for Emma. The day before the trial, Patricia sat with Emma in the kitchen, holding her hands. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You're the strongest person I know." Emma didn't feel strong. She felt broken. But she nodded anyway because she knew her mother needed to believe it. "We're going to get through this," Patricia said. "No matter what happens, we're going to get through this." And Emma wanted to believe her. She really did. The courthouse was packed the morning of the trial. Reporters, curious townspeople, family members on both sides.